Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be reviewing my 5-star predictions. So quite a while ago I made a 5-star predictions video. It's quite a staple on BookTube now, where I was anticipating 5 books that I was going to give 5 stars to. I have reviewed all of these books on the channel already in various reading wrap-ups, but I wanted a space to talk about them all as a collective, to look back on my predictions and see how good I am at anticipating my own reading taste. I'm not particularly rigid in my star rating system. There isn't really a kind of objective metric by which I decide what a 5-star book is. One of these books I gave 2 stars to, 3 of them I gave 4 stars to, and 1 of them I gave 5 stars to. And the thing that really separates a 5-star read from the rest of the pack for me is so subjective. It is so based on a kind of emotional reaction to something. It is so personal for me. But we'll talk about all that kind of stuff more throughout me talking about these books. Let's start with the book that I gave 2 stars to. So, The Damned United by David Peace. Now, I read this one very recently. It was in my May wrap-up. The reason I anticipated giving this book 5 stars was because I really love books and movies that are about football. I hadn't seen the movie of The Damned United somehow, so I thought I will read the book before I watch the film. A fiction book that I read about football specifically was The Football Factory, which totally took me by surprise. I had really moderate expectations for that book, and it was a huge 5 stars for me. So I wondered if this kind of literary novel about football was also going to be 5 stars for me, and unfortunately they're just really different books. So this one definitely isn't the fault of the book at all. In fact, I think this book is really brilliantly written. This is a fictionalized version of the life of Brian Clough, specifically when he was manager of Derby County and when he was manager of Leeds United. And I just really struggled with the fact that it's a fictionalization of a real person. I also really struggled with it predominantly being about one man. While The Football Factory was from one guy's perspective, it was looking at a lot of wider societal and political issues outside of just this one person. Whereas The Damned United is all about Brian Clough, which isn't necessarily a criticism at all, because the book doesn't pretend to be anything other than that. I knew going into this that this was a book all about Brian Clough. So I feel like I put unfair expectations on this novel. But unfortunately, it was not a 5-star read for me. So I have 3 books that I gave 4 stars to. I'm not articulate enough of a reviewer or talented enough of a reviewer to be able to specifically pin down what makes these 4-star reads and not 5-star reads. As I said, it is a really personal connection, and a 4-star read for me is a book that I loved. It's a book that I thought was really fantastic, but it was just missing that little extra something that I wanted. I predicted that The Regulars by Georgia Clark was going to be a 5-star read. This had so many things that was Leanne catnip. It's about female friendship. There are queer elements to this novel. It's a very light science fiction in that it's kind of a thought experiment. We're following 3 young women who are at kind of tricky points in their life where they don't really know what direction they're headed in. They've all got different concerns in terms of their relationships and their careers, and everything changes for these young women when they come across this product called Pretty, which will make them instantly conventionally attractive. And the novel explores how that impacts their lives for the better and for the worse. What opportunities are now available to them because they are conventionally attractive, but also how are they negatively perceived by the world around them because they're conventionally attractive. I thought each of the female characters in this book were really interesting, but I think in some ways the concept of this novel was greater than its execution, and I think I kind of got the point quite quickly. The point that yes, there are positive and negative sides to being conventionally attractive, that being conventionally attractive is a social construct, that it is damaging how women are valued based on their appearance. I got all of that very quickly. So it was a really interesting premise, but the kind of thought experiment elements of it didn't leave me much to think about because I was already very much on board with the message that the author was trying to get across. Again, that's not a bad thing. It just meant it didn't leave me thinking in the way that I would want a 5-star book to do. How Do You Like Me Now by Holly Bourne. I have been talking about Holly Bourne so much recently because I read 2 of her YA novels in May and I gave both of those 5 stars. but I didn't give her adult novel 5 stars. This book is about Tori, who is around 30 years old, and she is the best-selling author of a memoir that was really empowering for so many young women. Her book is about not really caring what other people think about you, about sticking 2 fingers up to the patriarchy, about being a badass babe. But in reality, Tori isn't really taking her own advice. She's stuck in a relationship that isn't working for her, and she is feeling so many complicated feelings around her friends who have started to settle down, get married, have kids. And she's concerned about why those things aren't happening for her, why her boyfriend hasn't proposed to her. And the relationship she has there, oh boy, it is so messy, and he is not a good guy. I definitely related to those feelings of being a young woman who talks a big talk about being like a certain kind of like strong, independent woman, but does struggle to often walk the walk in that regard. In fact, there were so many elements of this book I connected to, but I think the thing that stops this being 5 stars for me was that I found it a bit forgettable. This isn't something that has massively stayed with me. I absolutely flew through it when I read it. I read it so quickly, and it was definitely something that I enjoyed. But I suppose I do read a lot of these books about young women figuring their shit out. That's a phrase that I've used a lot of times on the channel to describe some of my favourite books. So amongst all of those books that I read that are in that kind of similar vein, this one didn't stick out to me a lot. But again, that's me being like super uber critical. I loved this book. Luster by Raven Leanne. I would say this is also in that similar kind of area of young woman figuring her shit out. It's about a young woman who is the only black girl in her office, and it looks at a lot of the difficulties that she faces because of that. It explores what it's like to be in a corporate situation like that, and how her home life in a kind of rented shitty apartment is such a contrast between that corporate kind of vibe. She also really wants to be an artist and feels kind of directionless about that. And then she also enters into a very complicated sexual relationship with a much older white man, and eventually she becomes involved with his whole family. His wife is aware of the affair and kind of half okay with it and half not okay with it. She finds out that he has an adopted black daughter. I suppose for me it felt like there were a lot of plates being spun in this book, and there were some elements of it that I wanted to explore in more depth. The relationship between our main character and her boyfriend, for want of a better word, his daughter, was something that I was really interested in, and I don't think we got enough of that. I also feel like for something that was such an intimate portrait of someone's life, we were being held at a distance from the character, and perhaps that is intentional, but I did find myself feeling frustrated with the character because of that. Again, like I said about the previous book, I think this book is fantastic, but it just wasn't a 5 stars. Now, the prediction that did live up to my expectations was Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. Now this is absolutely in that same kind of area, young women figuring their shit out. And I think what set this one apart as being a 5 stars for me was really personal. In fact, I think the books that I've mentioned already were probably written much better than Ghosts was, but as I said, this one just connected to me so personally, and I think it did look at things that I hadn't really seen in a novel before and left me thinking about them. This one is about Nina, who again is in her 30s, dealing with very similar things to what Tori is dealing with in How Do You Like Me Now. She is witnessing all of her friends start to settle down, to move away from London, to start to have kids, and she doesn't really know how to connect to those friends anymore. Like Tori, she is also a writer and navigating her career. She's also grappling with the fact that her father is experiencing memory loss. He's got Alzheimer's. And not only is that really difficult for her personally, but it puts a lot of strain on her relationship with her mother and the fact that they want to deal with this situation in different ways. So we're looking at the ghosts in her father's memory, we're looking at the ghosts of her friendships, but this book also does take a look at the kind of dating, I want to say phenomenon, that is ghosting. I think the term ghosting has become really diluted in recent months even, where people accuse other people of ghosting them, or they say they've been ghosted, when really it's a conversation that has just fizzled, or someone just hasn't texted them back immediately. This book takes a look at legitimate ghosting. When you are dating someone, you know, you've been out with them, you've gone on dates, you have slept together, and then they just completely vanish. It looks at the toxic masculinity that specifically leads to men doing this, and we see the really damaging effect that it has on our main character. I have been in that position, and I recognized so many things from my own behaviors in Nina. The sections of the book where she is texting him and she starts to feel confused about why he's not messaging her back. When he goes from constant communication to absolutely nothing, you see her giving him the benefit of the doubt, wondering if something has happened, and eventually coming to the realization that she has been ghosted. And it's a really horrible thing to watch, and it's a really horrible thing to experience. And I hadn't read a novel that dealt with that subject so acutely and intimately before. I did put quite a lot of sticky tabs in this one because there was so much of it that just stuck out to me. Oh, and it's also just really funny as well. Like, amongst all of that kind of difficult subject matters, it's very funny. So there we have it. They are my previous 5-star predictions and what I actually ended up thinking about them. I still consider this like a very successful round of recommendations. Like, to give a book 4 stars, that still means that I really loved it. I will be doing another round of 5-star predictions, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. Though I will hope that the next round of predictions is slightly more successful than 1 in 5 being correct. All of the books that I've mentioned will be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them. I would love to hear from you what book on your TBR you're anticipating to be 5 stars. That's all I'm going to talk about today. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will speak to you in my next video.